As you know, on Sunday night or Monday morning of every week, we post a new expository semiotics explaining why we would choose which lectionary readings. But in these readings, our dream is, and our desire is, to help you read the signs and fondle the details and spot the seminal metaphors, the condensed signs and the stories that are key for preaching to a digital culture. So strap on your seatbelt and join us as we prospect our passages for today. Good morning. This is lectionary vlog number 8 or LenTalk number 8. And we have some incredible, beautiful, wonderful text today. It's been hard to decide which one to go with. So I just want to mention a couple. One is Psalm 31. That is part of our reading, the first 5 verses and then the 10th and 11th verse. This is one of the Psalms that I believe Jesus sang from the cross. We know he sang Psalm 22. But I think he sang at least part of this one because let me just give you the first 5 verses here very, very quickly. In you, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me. Come quickly to my rescue. Be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name, lead and guide me. Free me from the trap that is set for me, for you are my refuge. Into your hands I commit my spirit. That sound a little familiar? I think that Jesus ushered himself into eternity singing some psalms on the cross, and one was Psalm 22, the whole psalm. But I think at least this little portion here, this part of our lecture read today, he may have sung as well. Into your hands, my Father, I commit my spirit. Now the other readings, one is this incredible passage that everybody loves to memorize, John 14. Let not your heart be troubled. And that's the famous beginning. Believe in God. There is this is the place where Jesus is describing the kind of home that he has for us. In my Father's house are many, and what comes next? We always say mansion. So everybody thinks that they got their own mansion and, their own 10,000 square foot house. But the real word here is dwelling places, which really means places where you will be at home, and it's more than rooms. It's more than guest rooms, but it's a dwelling place. But the real purpose of this passage is not that we all get a room, but the purpose of this passage is that where God is, that is where our home is. And so it is the presence of Christ that makes it a home. Home is in his heart and in his presence, and that's where our home is. And that's where we get this. Ask me anything in my name, and I will. In other words, if it's according to the will of Christ, then he will do it. I do want to make a special plea as we get it right and say it's not mansion. Everybody doesn't get their big castle. But there is a need to understand our home in eternity as a place of abundance and beauty and grandeur. And so it's not just a room. It's more than that. And let me tell you, I come out of Appalachian culture, and I come out of West Virginia mountain culture, and in all the 50 states, West Virginia is always number 50. And for people that are on the margins and poor and barely eking out an existence every day, when the poor dream, they don't dream of picket fences, okay? They have grand dreams. They have beautiful dreams. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop. In that bright land where, anybody know the song? We'll never grow old. And someday, here comes yonder, we'll never more wander and walk the streets that are paved with pure gold. And it goes on in each one of the verses to imagine this, the pearly great gates and the crystal fountains and the beautiful streams. And so let's just let people have their mansions if they need it. I mean, especially let the poor have a vision of in my Father's house there are many, and let's not think about, everybody gets a guest room. It's a dwelling place. But the real point is that your home is where Jesus is, and his presence is the home. And the point is to be near him. It's not to be separate from him. Heaven's a place where we are near him for eternity, and we share the same heart. Now, our other two passages, and I really want to spend some time on the Acts one, the first martyr story. But I want to look at this 1 Peter selection, and this 1 Peter 2, and the kind of picture here we have it says, like newborn babies crave pure spiritual milk. In other words, never leave the milk behind. And the milk is the milk of God's word here, the scriptures. And so you're always affected. In the early church, they actually had the Old and New Testament portrayed as two breasts, and we suckled on both breasts as a child. And as a child, we take the milk from the word. Now, Paul later says in another place that, stop gumming your way through the gospel. Grow some teeth and sink your teeth into the meat. Chew some meat. And so we get these conflicting images that we're here to still suckle the milk, but get some teeth and become grown-ups. And the truth is both, because we are to have the faith of a child. We're never to leave the milk behind. But at the same time, we're to have the theology of an adult and the understanding of an adult, and to be able to deal with the meat of God's word. So the milk and meat. Obviously, the New Testament is not kosher here. I mean, so you never leave the milk behind. And you've heard me say it before, the older I get, my faith is getting more simple. Oh, I love that milk. But my theology is getting more complex. Give me the meat. It's getting more sophisticated, more nuanced, more subtle. But my faith is all about the milk of the Logos, the milk of the word of Jesus. So you may want to kind of play with what First Peter is doing here in chapter 2, and calling us to never leave the milk behind. Now, I would want to spend, if I were preaching this, I would spend a lot of time on the Acts text, and they only want us here to read Acts 7, the end of the story, if you will, of the Stephen stoning. The Acts 7 begins. It's one of the longest chapters in the New Testament. Acts 7 begins with the story of Stephen before the Sanhedrin. It's an incredible speech. He tells the whole story. Now remember who Stephen is. Stephen is one of the 7 deacons that the 12, the apostles, called out and said, we got to organize this church here in Jerusalem, and we need some people to help organize the distribution of the food to the poor. And so Stephen was one of those. But even when he's distributing food and reaching out to the needy and the sick, you cannot help but preach. I mean, and so here Stephen is even preaching there and testifying to Jesus, telling stories about what Jesus has done. I mean, this is literally the priesthood of all believers. He just can't stop, can't help himself. And then, so then people start saying, well, did you hear what Stephen said here? Did you hear what he said here about Jesus and who Jesus is? And so Stephen got in a lot of trouble because he couldn't keep his mouth shut, because he just kept, talking about Jesus as he was distributing food and helping out the needy. That's why you can't separate evangelism and discipleship. You can't separate evangelism and justice. I mean, you can't. So he's hauled before the Sanhedrin, and it doesn't go well because he doesn't mince words with them. He tells the whole story, and he tells the whole story from the beginning here with a Christological bent. And so he sees Jesus throughout the story and shows how Jesus was there all along. And therein is his problem, because the longer he talked, the more, the angrier they got. And when they want us to pick it up is here with a specific story about the stoning of Stephen. When they heard this, in other words, the speech that goes on for 53 verses, okay. When they heard this, they were furious and gnashed their teeth at him. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, now hear this, listen to this carefully, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Lord, he said, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing, Son of Man, the human one, standing at the right hand of God. Now notice, standing at the right hand of God. At this, they covered their ears, and yelling at the top of their voices, they all rushed at him, dragged him out of the city, and began to stone him. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their clothes at the feet of a young man named Saul. And while they were stoning him, Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And then he fell on his knees and cried out, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. In other words, he died. So you have here an incredible story of Stephen, one of the deacons, one of the stewards, if you will, as the first martyr. And he's always been seen as our first martyr. And he just made them so mad that I love this, they covered their ears and they yelled at the top of their voices. And how many times, sisters and brothers, do you and I, when we have something we don't want to hear, we stop listening and then we speak over people. We stop listening and we speak over people. And that's what they're doing to Steve here. And they're stopping listening, they're covering their ears, and they're speaking over him. They're just yelling at the top of their lungs so that they don't have to hear him. We do this all the time. We refuse to hear the other side. We talk over other people. And in doing this, we not only dehumanize the opponent or the people that we don't like, but we, in some ways, demonize them as well. And so we got to be really careful here about not covering our ears, not speaking over people, because this is how the first martyr got martyred. Precisely this. They refused to hear him out, and they would only yell him down as best they could. Now, stoning in the first century is two kinds. Let's be clear about this. One is they take you and throw you off a high cliff into a pit below, into the cliffs and the rocks, and that was part of the temptation of Jesus by the devil in the wilderness. They'll take you into a high mountain and cast yourself down. In other words, survive a capital punishment. That's a stoning for Jews. Capital punishment is stoning. The other was they put you in this deep pit, and then they hurl on top of you huge rocks. And so you're standing for as long as you can and trying to fend off these rocks that are coming down on you, and then you just basically collapse, as Stephen did, collapse on his knees. And stoning is not somebody in the middle and everybody tossing rocks at them. I mean, think about that. Who's getting hit? Everybody, because nobody's got perfect aim. So this is not how stoning takes place. They take you out of the city, put you in a big pit, and then get there. And that's why they gave Saul their coats, because they're taking these huge boulders, and these boulders are going to get their coats dirty as they take them and then drop them and dump them on this poor person that's being stoned. So Paul gets to keep the coats as he sits there or stands there and watches and sees what's happening. Notice Stephen's last words are not "Save me, Lord." And this is the thing that amazed me as I was reading this for the umpteenth time, and I'd missed this before. It's not "Save me, Lord." He's not looking to the past. He's looking to the future. Receive my spirit. And as he's looking to the future and asks God to receive his spirit, he's not, and take care of them for what they did to me. He's actually modeling Jesus. Forgive them. He's forgiving his killers, his murderers, as he's asking to be received into God's presence. And he's more concerned about his enemies than he is himself. Isn't this amazing? He's more concerned about those that are killing him than even himself. Now, I want us to pause here, this vision, and that's what made them mad, because when he said that the heavens opened up and he saw Jesus where? Standing at the right hand of God. This is what was the ultimate crime here. Now notice Jesus, where he is, okay? We have him in the apostle, we seated at the right hand of the Father. But Stephen has him standing at the right hand of the Father, all right? Now, I don't know about you, but I think we need to spend more time with the ascension, taking the ascension more seriously. For many years, Jesus just couldn't wait to get home. I mean, I've spent enough time with these people. Just get me back to it so I can go back to my pre-existent state before I had to go down there and be with all these people. And that's not the story. He is now still one of us. Did you hear me? He's still one of us. He's the new human at the right hand of God, with his wounds, with him, and he is still pleading for us as one of us. And do you know what he's saying to us? And this is what Stephen sees. And not only does he see Jesus at the right hand of God, which would have sent all of them crazy, but he sees him in such a way that we need to hear when we read this, that Jesus is at the right hand of God, whether he's seated or here he's standing, because he's there standing with Stephen, who's standing in this pit for as long as he can, fending off these rocks. But I'm still with you. I'm with you to the end. Hey, we're in this together. I'm here. I'm with you. We're in this together. I will never leave you or forsake you, even at these worst moments. We're in this together. What an incredible moment. Now, I want to end with a little mention of Saul. And the focus is so much on Stephen that we forget about Saul here. But isn't it amazing that Saul is witnessing this? He's witnessing this incredible thing that is just so moving to us as we're telling the story of Stephen. And he doesn't become a Christian. In fact, Saul is so not moved by what he has just seen that this is when Saul gets activated to go and not just hold the coats of the stoners, but to be a stoner himself. This is the moment that this is his conversion to stoning the Christians. It's not his conversion to Christ. I mean, the conversion to Christ doesn't come after a divine intervention. And that's when Saul becomes Paul. But do you hear me? the story should be, you go, but that's not the right story. What do you mean? He should have seen this and immediately seen Jesus and in Stephen and become a disciple. No. You see, everybody's story's different, and God does not work with any one of us in a franchise way. In this is how it's supposed to happen. It is different for every one of us. And let me prove it to you. The most beloved song in the world, if there's one global soundtrack that everybody in the world knows, it's Amazing Grace. It's the most famous hymn. It's the one global song that everybody knows. From wherever you are in the world, everybody can sing Amazing Grace. That's the power of that song. But you know how it was written, right? I mean, you know the story of John Newton. No, you don't. Because we've twisted the story to make it to fit our cliches and our blueprints and our formulas. But God, like here, how did Paul miss it? How did he not see Christ in that moment with Stephen? And Paul later on just can't believe he missed it. But he did. And you're going to miss some things too. We're all going to miss some things. God does not work in nice, routinized, cliche, franchise fashion. 1748. This guy named John Newton, who was orphaned at 6 years of age and was raised by his sea captain father. He grew up foul, just really a nasty sailor, typical what you think of when you think of the people of the heart of the seas. He was known for his swearing. He could outswear anybody. And in 1748, there was a massive storm. He was working as a sailor on a ship. And as a result of that massive storm, he said a prayer, Lord, if you save me from this storm, you save me off the ship, I will serve you. And I will turn my life around. And so in 1748, he became a Christian. And he began attending some of the Wesleyan churches in London. And he began going to some of the Anglican churches and just really not Wesleyan church, but I mean, he became a follower of Wesley a little bit. And he had a girlfriend that he loved dearly. Her name was Polly Catlett. And Polly's mother didn't think that her daughter should marry somebody this despicable and crude and rude and nasty. And so he decided that he needed to fix up his life. He needed to save money to marry Polly. He needed to prove to Polly's mother that he could be a respectable citizen, that he have enough money to take care of her. And he actually had in the back of his mind, I think I need to go to seminary. I think I need to become a pastor. And that's going to take money. So in 1748, after he becomes a Christian, he becomes captain of a slave ship because that was the fastest way to raise money in that society. And in 18th century England, that was the captain of a slave ship, it's hard for us to imagine this, was a respectable person and could amass a fortune very quickly. And he did. In 1750, he married Polly. And he just started amassing this fortune. But you can see in the letters he's writing to Polly as he's running these slave ships to and from Africa, it starts to bother him. And he starts reading Wilberforce, and he starts reading what Wesley had to say about slavery. And in 1754, 6 years after he became a Christian, he finally said, slavery is a sin. And he gave up his slave ship and his slave trading. But he did not become a slave trader until after he became a Christian and wanted to clean up his life. And then, in 1754, when he gave it up, and he became pastor of this Olney church and 10 years later in 1764, where he met William Cowper. It's spelled Cowper, the poet, the songwriter. But it's spelled Cowper, but it's really pronounced Cooper. And together they created one of the most famous hymn books in Christian history, the only hymns, as Newton and Cooper wrote hymns for this community that was raw, poor, ragged. And these hymns that were written for those parishioners in that 2,000 population town, basically lace workers, sweatshop workers, mostly illiterate. Those hymns are some of the best known and best loved hymns in Christian history. And the most loved of all is a hymn written in the 1770s. As Newton is looking back on his life, and he goes, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch." See, we don't know the meaning of that word, wretched. And that's why let's take out that word. No. We want to keep that word in because he understood, how could I have been a disciple of Jesus and not seen what I was doing to those slaves and all my years of slave trading? How in the world did I miss it? As Paul looked back on his, how did I miss it and not become a Christian at that moment of Stephen's stoning? And God, there are some things in your life that you're going to look back 20 years from now, 10 years from now. How did I miss it? Why didn't I see this? I saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. 'Twas blind. Oh, I was so blind. 6 years blind. But now. See, you can be blind and be a disciple, not just blind and be a sinner. You can be blind as a disciple too. So the incredible passage, the stoning of Stephen, that has two main characters, Stephen, but don't forget Saul. Semiotics is the art of angling, of turning things askew, upside down, inside out, cattywampus, sunny side up, over easy, scrambled, hard-boiled. We hope you enjoyed today's journey, but always remember, it's more important you prepare the preacher than you prepare the sermon.